So from Dollar Tree, you're going to want to grab yourself another one of these men's fleece scarves. And I just grabbed this one here in the buffalo check pattern. And then I had this seasonal decor piece left over from Halloween. And I took it apart and I went at it with a can of spray paint. And while I had that spray paint out, I also went ahead and gave a shot to this little red truck. I know, don't judge me, but I wanted to neutralize it for this project. So if you want to see how it all comes together, all you have to do is continue watching. So now that we went ahead and traced out our circle using this little insert as a template, now that we cut the fabric down to size, we're going to set it aside and we have it all ready for the next step. And so now what I'm going to be doing is taking some of the sandpaper to this frame that we spray painted and ever so gently just go over some of the intricate detail that's on this frame just to expose some of the black that's underneath it, and that's all we want to do. So here's a closer look of what that frame should look like after hitting it lightly with that piece of sandpaper just over the raised areas to expose some of the black from underneath. And I didn't want to go too heavy-handedly on it because I didn't want to take it down too far, and I'm pleased with the way it looks. So now it's time to secure that fabric onto the insert, and we're just going to be doing that by adding some hot glue to the connecting points. We're not going to go over the entire disc because we don't want any of those unsightly glue lines to show through the fabric. So we're just going to hit it with some hot glue on the bottom, and then we're going to spin it around and do the same thing on the top and vice versa on both edges to secure that fabric to the disc. So once our fabric is secured, now all that's left to do is to pop the insert right back into the frame. Here's a look at that insert once it's popped back in, and I wouldn't be completely honest if I didn't say that I did have to manipulate it quite a bit to get it back in because of the thickness of the fabric, but I was able to get it in and it's nice and secure. So now all we need to do is secure our truck onto the frame, and we're going to be doing so by adding a bead of hot glue on each of the connecting points where the truck meets the fabric. So we're just going to add a dollop of that hot glue on each one of the corners of the truck, as well as that Merry Christmas sign on the bottom, so that we could adhere it to the frame. And whatever areas you don't catch with the glue now, you could always readjust once it's set down on the frame. So now we just have to find the center, place it down into place, and hold it in place for a couple of seconds until the glue sets. And here's a look at what it looks like once it's been secured down. Everything is nice and secure. Nothing is moving or going anywhere. The Merry Christmas sign looks a little off-center, but I think it's just because of the wiring, the way it's connected to the wheels. Now I'm showing you here these 3 rolls of ribbon that I purchased from the Dollar Tree, and I'm thinking of trying my hands at making a bow because it does need a little something. And so I cut 3 strips of that ribbon down to size, the same size, and I'm showing you here that I'm going to try to manipulate it and try to turn it into a bow. So I did have to manipulate that ribbon quite a bit in order to achieve this bow because nothing is really glued together. They're all separate pieces of ribbon. However, I was able to achieve what I wanted, and so now we're just going to be gluing it onto the frame, and just by adding a dollop of glue to the back of that knot. And I kind of like the way the ribbon looks cascaded diagonally off to the side, so that's what we're going to be achieving here. And here is what it should look like after being all put together. This is the final result. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed creating it. So from Dollar Tree, you're going to want to grab yourself some glue sticks and a pair of scissors and your trusty old glue gun. Also, while you're there, you're going to grab yourself one of these 9-inch foam wreath forms and one of these Let It Snow MDF signs with the jute rope cord, and I got all of this from the Dollar Tree. Next, I had this leftover fleece from the project before, and it's a half of a fleece buffalo check scarf that I folded in half and then cut it lengthwise after folding it in half again, and then once again folded it in half, and I was able to get 4 strips out of that one half of the buffalo check scarf. So to get started, we're going to be securing the fabric onto this reef form right at that seam by adding a bead of hot glue directly onto the fabric and adhering it to the wreath form. Once we get that bead of glue onto the fabric, we're going to want to move quickly and add it right to the seam and pat it down into place so that we can start wrapping our fabric. Once the fabric is secured in place, you can now proceed to start wrapping the fleece onto the form. And you're just going to continue to wrap it around, slightly overlapping and not pulling it too tight because this fabric is very forgiving and it will stretch. So you're going to continue to keep wrapping that fleece around the wreath form until you reach the end of your fabric to where you'll have to secure it in place with that glue once again to reattach another piece of fleece. Now we're going to match up the pieces of fleece by fusing the 2 pieces of fabric together where one end and the other one begins so that we can continue the process with wrapping our fleece around the form. And now we're going to continue wrapping until once again we run out of fabric, and we're going to glue it down again just like we did in the steps before. Once again, it's time to secure that fabric onto the wreath form by adding another bead of glue directly onto that scarf, and we're going to secure it onto the wreath form by just pressing it and holding it in place. So now we're going to be matching up the next piece to where we left off by adding a bead of hot glue directly onto that piece of fleece, and we're going to fuse them together, and hopefully we're going to be finishing out our wreath form with this final piece of fabric. So we're going to continue wrapping until we reach the end. So it would appear that this fabric is going to be giving us the exact coverage that we're going to be needing to finish out this project. And as you see here, it's taking us all the way to the end to where I'm able to secure it in place. So now we're going to be adding that glue to secure that final piece of fabric into place, pressing it firmly and securing it onto the wreath form, and this is what you should be left with. So reverting back to that MDF sign that I showed at the beginning of the video, showing you here that I was able to manipulate that metal wordage just by using my shears and taking the scissors underneath the metal letters and popping it right off. So now we have a clean slate, and we're able to use the metal wordage on top of the wreath form that we just created. But before adhering that metal wordage onto the wreath form, I just wanted to show you that, remember, we were left over with an extra piece of fleece because we did cut 4 strips and we were able to get by with only using 3 on the wreath form. So now I think I want to give a shot at trying to turn this piece of fabric into a bow to attach to our form. So there's nothing fancy about this bow. We're just going to be taking it and making 2 bunny ears and pulling them together in the loop and tying them like if we were tying a shoelace and converting it into a bow and just playing with it until we achieve the look that we want. So now that our bow meets our approval, we're going to be playing with the placement and just laying it onto the wreath in different areas until we're comfortable where we think we're going to be attaching it, and then we're going to go on ahead and attach those metal letters accordingly. So because once the hot glue makes contact with the metal, it dries really quickly, we're going to have to secure this while we have the letter wordage on the form itself. So we're going to add a bead of glue right underneath that S where it touches the fabric, and we're going to repeat the same steps right underneath the W where it's connecting with the fabric and the form, and then we're going to spin it around and repeat the process on the top, securing the L and the T to the wreath form as well. And we're going to try our best to get the glue to secure it down without making too much of a mess. However, I will show you in a minute where I do have a little bit of a mishap and there is some glue seepage. So here I'm going to show you where I had that little mishap that I was talking about, and I had some glue seepage that came out over the letter L. So in order to camouflage that, I'm going to be utilizing a piece of this branch that I have from another Dollar Tree wreath form, and I just plucked two branches off and I kind of formed a circle ring with it, and then I also pulled out some berry picks and greenery off of this other ornament that I had from Dollar Tree. And so what I did was just bunched it together and sort of popped it in the center of the hoe of that little white wreath, if you will. And so now we're just going to tuck that in there and glue it onto the top of that L. So sometimes mishaps end up working out in your favor. So that's all I wanted to show you, that we're going to secure this now, and I think it just adds that extra character to the wreath form. So now that you glued down your little berry sprigs, this is what you should be left with, and everything is nice and neatly secured. Nothing is jiggling or falling down or anything. Everything is securely in place. And so now we're just going to go on ahead and move on to the next step, which would be to attach that ribbon to the bottom of our wreath form. So now all we're going to do is add a nice generous dollop of glue to the back of the knot on that ribbon, and we're just going to be nice and generous with that glue, and we're going to secure it right smack in the center of that styrofoam wreath form, and we're going to press it and hold it in place until the glue sets. So now we're going to go ahead and ducktail those ends of the ribbon to give it a nice finished look, and we're going to do it on both sides of the ribbon. Repeating the same step on the opposite side of the ribbon and cutting that ducktail. This is what we should be left with, and this is what your wreath should now look like. So now that our ribbon is secured and our tails are cut, now what's left to do is to secure the wreath form back onto the MDF board that it originally came from. And so to do that, we're just going to be adding some glue to the wreath form itself and securing it onto that board. That way we could hang it from that twine that it originally came with, which is why I never removed the hanger. So we're just going to be securing that with some glue now and moving on to the next step. So now that I centered the placement of the wreath form, I'm just going to be adding some glue to the contact points where the wreath form is going to be meeting with the MDF, and I'm going to spin it around and repeat the same process on the top of the wreath form as well as the corresponding sides to secure it to the MDF board, as opposed to applying glue to the entire board itself or the wreath. So I forgot to share with you that when I took off the berry picks from that other ornament, it also had the tiniest jingle bells ever, and they actually jingle. And so I think that this is just going to be the final finishing touches. I'm going to be gluing them right on top of that knot, and I think it's going to tie everything in together. So let's just glue these little microscopic bells onto the bow. We have bell number 1. And now we're just going to go and glue bell number 2 side by side. And I think this is just going to tie everything in together and make it look more cohesive. Here's a look at the finished product. I think if you're a renter and you're not able to hang up any huge wreaths on your door, this will work out perfect in those scenarios. I think it's large enough but yet small enough to work. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial as much as I enjoy creating it for you. Please do not hesitate to give this video a thumbs up. It will help my channel out a lot. And if you're not already subscribed, I'd like to encourage you to go on ahead and do so. This is my most craftiest time of the season, so you might want to check back with this channel to see what else I come up with. Once again, I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye now.